Well, now we're going to make another crust called pâte brisée in French. Now, brisée means broken or short crust, and this crust is sturdier, and it's very suitable for pies or tarts that start out with a very soupy contents, like a custard pie, for example. Now, this crust starts out with our flour, and we're going to add our cubes of cold butter, and I'm just going to squeeze those and break each one and get them coated with a little bit of flour before I start mixing it in. This is to make sure it gets broken, because one of the things that's necessary with this crust is that we streak our butter into this dough so that it's nice and flaky. When we roll it out, we're looking for those streaks of butter. If we see them in there, we know our dough is going to be flaky. If our dough is nice and elastic, we know it's going to be strong enough to hold our contents. And if our dough is too crumbly or broken, we need to add a little more water or put it back in the refrigerator to rest. Now, I've broken each of those pieces of butter that's gone in there. I haven't even stirred it yet, and already you can see that sort of pebbly finish to it. I'm just going to give it one or two more goings over with my finger to make sure that those broken pieces are broken. I can see my butter is almost incorporated in there fully. And now I'm going to give it a few big turns to get it pebbly and mealy. And once that's done, I'm going to add a mixture of an egg yolk and 3 or 4 tablespoons of cold water. And that is going to be the liquid that holds this crust together. And there you go. You see that? See how that butter is nicely distributed into that flour? Notice that there's no shortening in here, so we're not going for that flaky shortening quality. I'm going to mix this around, and then I'm going to use my fork here to stir that into a rough clump of dough. Once that's done, I'm going to turn it out onto my board here, and you can see this starting to come together. Again, a good sign is that it's coming away from the sides of the bowl. There we go. And I'm going to bring that together with my hand. Again, I'm looking for feel. And I can see here that it's moist enough to hold together. You get all of the contents out of there. There we go. And out onto our surface. Now you can see here that it's still a little crumbly. And that's exactly how it should be at this stage, because this dough is not finished. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work it with just a little bit of water, maybe a tablespoon in total. And I'm going to push it away from me to one side of the board. I'm going to bring it back here. And this technique is called frizzage. And what I'm doing is I'm smearing the butter in one direction with my hand. And as I'm doing that, I can see that my dough is coming together beautifully, and it's got that nice elastic feeling that I was talking about before. And by doing this technique, I'm able to streak my butter through that dough. And you can see now how perfect and elasticy this dough is, in stark contrast to the way it was before we added that last tablespoon of water. Remember how it was so crumbly? Now it's absolutely perfect. Well, we have our pâte brisée rolled out and placed into our ceramic pie plate here. And all that I've done is just folded a little extra bit of crust in there so I have a nice thick crust, because I'm going to use a fairly old-fashioned technique for crimping using a fork. Now, This is the first one that I ever learned sitting in my grandmother's kitchen. And all I'm doing is placing my thumb on the outside of that crust so that I don't break the crust over the edge of the pie plate. And I'm just pushing away from myself gently with the tines of that fork, turning the pie plate, always trying to work in front of me, and make some nice crimp marks here. Now, this shell is going to be blind baked as well to ensure that the crust cooks evenly with the custard for this pumpkin pie. And remember, we talked about pricking the pâte brisée so it doesn't buckle when we blind bake it. Now, a little tip is to make sure to get this into the freezer for about a half hour, 45 minutes at a medium, to relax the gluten so much that when you do blind bake it off, you're not going to have an excessive amount of shrinkage. I still want crust on the edges of my pie pan. So this goes off to the freezer. Now, I had some dough scrap left over, and I didn't want to bake this off with butter and cinnamon and sugar for the kids. I wanted to save it for some little decoration, and I have a maple leaf cookie cutter here, and I just press firmly down on that and remove the cutout and just gently poke that out, poking out the edges first with my finger so I get those nice bright edgings on it. But here I've got this beautiful maple leaf, and I'll bake that off along with it and use it to decorate the pie when we serve it at the table later on. Isn't that beautiful? And you can do that with all sorts of little shapes and leaves and things like that. So it's a very valuable thing to hold on to your scraps. Now, after the pie plate comes out of the freezer and we're ready to blind bake it, I just use my beans and double foil again. And you can see this one has come out of the oven a few moments ago, and it's just absolutely perfect. And you can see by putting the crust in the freezer, in the pie plate, we have absolutely zero shrinkage on that, which is what we're looking for. So here goes my custard, pouring slowly into the center of the pie. Now, like most custards, this is going to puff up a little bit and then settle. So I want to come up almost to the edging there. And we are ready for the oven. And now we bake our pumpkin pie for about 50 or 60 minutes at 325 degrees. Now, I want to check the pumpkin pie that I've had baking in there for a little while. Oh, look at that. But I've got a little foil crust protector here because what's happening on our pie, if you see that it's jiggly in the middle, but it still needs to set a little more. But I don't want my crust to get any browner than it is. It's absolutely perfect. Any more and it would be burnt. So I cut a hole out of this aluminum foil, and I'm just going to drape that around the edges and make sure that it doesn't interfere with my custard there, and just slide that back in and let it cook for another 10 minutes. That way the custard sets and the crust won't burn.